Phyllis Caro, you've got this series called Pioneering Women in Poker. Phyllis Caro, I read part one. Sounds like an amazing woman.
Oh my God, I can't even. First of all, she's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, which is very difficult in poker. If you've been in the industry long enough, she just stands out. But what an awesome woman she is. And the fact that she's done so much, just not because her name is Carol, but herself and her integrity. It's just her story is amazing.
I'll admit that when I was reading it, I was quite surprised because when you hear the name Caro, of course you think about Mike and the Mad Genius. He's a prolific writer, the Book of Tells, his University of Poker. So I was surprised to learn that Phyllis is so involved. I mean, she was there way back in the early 1970s when everything started, right?
Yes, she was there, and same thing. We've known her. Robert's known her forever, and I met her when I met Robert. But I had no idea too how she is there at the forefront of poker history. I mean, her story is so amazing. And the second part will focus on her time at the Bicycle Casino, and she just helped be there to clean up poker. Her, Mike, and George Hardy. That'll be the focus of the second article.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit here that show you the history of poker. George told me when he went to Vegas, and he had a dream of building the largest card club in the world, which ended up being the Bicycle Casino. And it was true in Vegas. The dealers wore black and white. There were no uniforms. And the abuse the dealers took from players in the 70s and early 80s is hard to imagine today. And keep in mind that cigarette smoking and things like that were just common at a poker table. And they would just abuse the dealers, blow smoke in their face and cuss them and throw cards. I know of one player tried to set a dealer on fire, took a cigarette lighter and tried to burn them up. I mean, it really was bad. And George's idea was to clean it up. He hired Phyllis to get the job done.
There was a lot of cheating back then, right?
Right. It was difficult to navigate through, and especially a lot of it came out of Gardena, California. That was where they all trained. And I became general manager of a casino there in 1986. And I had three problems to deal with. Actually, one was the casino had no business. The second was the drugs. And third was cheating. When they hand you the keys to a casino, and those are your three problems to clean up. You have no business, and the parking lot's full of drug users, and what games you have, they're all cheating. So I can remember those days of trying to clean up poker. But going back to Mike Carroll, George wanted, stationary dealers instead of everybody dealt themselves in the old days. And he hired Mike Carroll for the integrity, and Phyllis to put together a staff and train them to try to stop the abuse. It was over. George told every rounder in California, your days of cheating, if you come to the Bicycle, it's over. We're going to run an honest casino here. And it changed history of poker. You can go back to, I can remember when Phyllis Carroll and Marcia Wagner, and they got together and they said, we're going to stop cigarette smoking. And they said, well, probably 70% of the people smoke. And they said, well, you'll lose all your business. And they bit the bullet and just fought for these players. I mean, it was a bloodbath. We'll never go back to the Bicycle if you try to stop us from smoking cigarettes in the tournaments. And we won't play any more tournaments. But she stood strong and said, no, it's a no smoking tournament. And that changed everything.
And Patty, she started as a dealer and took that abuse that Robert's talking about, worked her way all the way up to the point where she was at the forefront of the Bicycle Casino hiring and auditioning dealers, right? She's done all the jobs in the casino.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. After I believe that, what was it called, the dealer coordinator, then she went up to one of the first, if not the first, women tournament director at the Bicycle Casino, which will be, I believe, in the second article. So, yeah, she raised all the way to vice president
of operations. Of the largest card club in the world at the time.
And one thing I found interesting, too, is that she actually helped Mike with some of his books.
Yep, that's the secret behind every male writer. I'm sitting with one right here.
She was right there at the beginning. She worked in a number of different casinos, but she was there at the beginning of the game of Omaha, which you introduced us all to. She dealt Nugget Hold'em, is that correct?
That's correct. She tells me things that I didn't even know myself about how it all, how it all started. And Phyllis and I've been friends. I knew her a little bit in the 70s, but got to know her in the 80s. And then, of course, I worked for her. When I was marketing director of the Bicycle, she was vice president of operations. And I remember her career when they would give us a memo and say, by the way, Phyllis Caro's now been promoted. Phyllis Caro's now been promoted to this job, and I was always going in her office and say, congratulations. It was nice to have one of your closest friends being elevated through the corporation and you're working for her. So it made a real good relationship. We brainstormed over marketing for poker many hours in our office, just talking about what can we do for players. It was a little bit of different mindset back in those days. Let's say that we're going to plan for the Diamond Jim Brady, and it doesn't happen today. But back in those days, George Hardy would sit down. He said, last year we spent on the poker players $70,000 in gifts. And he said, this year I want to spend a lot more. I want to spend at least $100,000. And he said, what else can we do to make the players happy? You know, that's a nice way to plan. At that time, it was the second major tournament in the world. He wasn't concerned about the bottom line. He wasn't concerned about how much rate you charged. None of those mattered. He just wanted to make the players happy. He used it more of, if I can make them happy the month of August, then they'll come back the rest of the year to the Bicycle Casino.
Right.
And,
well, do you think it's important to recognize these women in poker? I mean, on our show, we've had a lot of women on. Very proud of it. We've had Jan Fisher, Kathy Liebert, Maria Ho, Barbara Enright, Susie Isaacs. We've had Nicole Juergens from Live at the Bike on. But still, women are outnumbered by far in this game that we all love called poker. What do we need to do besides recognizing them in articles like yours, Patty, to bring more into the game?
That's what I discussed with Robert, because he doesn't realize it. As a man playing poker for 50 years, he doesn't, and never being a woman, he doesn't realize how intimidating it is. Like Robert knows, I've been playing poker with my family since we were children. That's what we do on our family events. We play poker. I've done it forever. But once you go into the casino, it's a whole different world. And for women, it's very intimidating. To be the only woman usually at the table, you know, we're 10 to 5%, 5 total. Right, Robert?
Right.
And it's just, they don't realize how women are treated differently, and men just don't realize. So many, who did I speak to? Was it Linda Johnson or somebody? But they say, so many women, you have no idea. Here we are, the 10%, but how many other women will run out because the way you're treated at the tables. Well, the one thing I learned, you have to get a very thick skin. Whatever
Right.
they tell you, they're just trying to throw you off your game, and you just don't let it affect you. But it's very intimidating for women. So the main thing, I think, is to ease women into it with these ladies events, and then, you know, just provide support. That's what the Pink Chip Poker was, to think of a way to ease women into poker. So I write these articles, and I ask the women, what would you recommend to women who want to get into the industry? And every single woman says they would recommend it. They love it. But it's very intimidating.
It's interesting you use that word intimidating, because when we had Nicole Juergens on and also Maria Ho, they both use that exact same word. You know, when you sit down, some guys are chauvinistic. They make comments. They think they're being funny. I mean, poker's got its whole other language, so sometimes you don't understand right away. It can be intimidating.
Oh, I've made many, many mistakes because I would get emotional. There's no place for emotion in poker. I learned that.
Absolutely. And when you hear stories like that, Robert, you really got to give kudos to the women that, like Phyllis Caro, like Jan Fisher, like Linda Johnson, like Barbara Enright, Susie Isaacs, that have stood the test of time. They entered the game way back when it was a whole different story, I would assume.
True. And, you know, talking about Phyllis Caro, you have to give her credit, too, because she started the ladies' events. And we would do things like, we wanted to get more women into poker. And I remember going out to Macy's and saying, would you like to get involved with poker for women? And we ended up doing facials and makeovers and stuff like that for women, you know, just making it like a spa day so they could come and relax at the casinos. But we were trying to get more women in poker, and it's worked. I mean, we were pioneers in developing tournaments and stuff just for women. You know, like her article said there. The next one we'll talk about the Queen of Hearts and Queen of Diamonds. And we had a series for women. And I remember at the Hustler Casino, even in the year 2000, Liz Flint started a ladies event. We've always pushed for ladies at the Normandy Casino. I remember we had a ladies night on Friday night. You know, Steve Wynn, you have to give him credit for something. If you go back to 1984 and 83, he tried to compete with the World Series, and Steve Wynn, it was called the Grand Prix of Poker. And he spent a lot of money bringing in a fashion show and a buffet and a ladies' day for poker players' wives, and just get them involved in the casino and the gaming. And he made women feel very special. People talk about Jack Binion and what they did for men. Well, Steve Wynn actually was the first one to go out and reach out and say, there's another partner in this poker for all the males. There's a wife or a lady poker player, and no one's doing anything for them. And I remember his brochure. It said, on this particular day of the tournament, it's all about women. And he did the fashion shows and these great brunches and stuff like that for women. A lot of people don't give Steve Wynn credit for also being a pioneer in helping women.
What's your gut tell you, Patty? Are we going to have a woman at the final table of the World Series of Poker in the near future?
My God, I love Barbara Enright. Love her, but it is time. But I think we're about 5 years away. The numbers alone, not that women aren't world class. I think it's just statistically, there's just so few.
Lyle Berman made a statement, Derek, one time. He said, if there's 100 players in the World Series of Poker main event, and you are the best player in the world, and you really are the best player in the world, and there's 100 players, that probably means you'll never win the World Series of Poker.
Really?
In other words, it's very difficult. Like Patty said, you take 5 or 10% of the field are women. It's just very hard to get to the final table.